Thank you for being so cool. This is awesome. Okay, you're even on time. You are like more the teacher's pet than anyone else. I'm going to move this. Is it all right if we're like informal? I don't know how formal or posh I'm supposed to be. So there's I don't know if it's sacred, but anyway. I'm hoping that this is more interactive than anything else because I rarely get to be in this kind of environment with people that are just passionate about reaching the lost and doing mission, and I'm as interested in what you're doing as you would be in what I'm doing. So there's a couple of ways we could go. I could either give a talk, which is great, but I have a lot of those on YouTube if you want one of them. And so, or I could talk a little bit out of my heart about what we do and the breadth of it, and then we could do some Q&A if you're interested in that. So you could tell me which way, just so you know that I'm prepped. There it is, okay? Like lots of work there. But what would serve you the best? Because to me, that's what you could do in a workshop that you just can't do anywhere else. And so do you want me to talk a little bit about how I've ended up doing what I'm doing, a little bit of what we do? Because at first they were like, just talk about A21 and Propel. I'm like, okay. But I would love, if you have some really great questions, I'm not talking about even just the work I do, but maybe if you want to pick my brain about kind of 37, I mean, there's some of you here could teach me a lot, but it is 37 years, on the front lines around the world, planning churches, doing mission, evangelism. It's so funny. People that would only know me in some context in America would think all I do is speak at Christian conferences in America, but that is actually the least thing that I do. It's the most visible thing that I do, but it's not if you look at my 365-day calendar in a year, it is not the thing that I do the most. So what I love is the world. For God so loved the world. And it's, with my kind of background and being Greek and raised in Australia, and my parents came from Alexandria, Egypt, and so when they didn't want us to understand what was going on at the dinner table, they would speak Arabic. I didn't speak English until I was 5. So the worldview is what it was just woven into me. And it was interesting moving to America in 2010 and then sort of getting a little bit more familiar with the American evangelical southern world, which is its own ecosystem. It is a foreign. It took me, I had to go to Wheaton for 4 years so that I could understand American evangelicalism, because it was, sometimes you think it's the epicenter of the world, but when you've actually been working about that time, 35 years in all the other world, I didn't even know that existed. And so suddenly you're like, oh, wow, this is foreign. It was like I had to learn a new language and a new way of understanding. So it's been awesome and I love it, but it's just, it's not, in some circles, because of the high visibility I have in some of those circles, that's what people think I do. And I go, man, that was the last thing I've come into so far. There's just so much other work that we've done. So you heard last night, it was 2007. So already Nick and I'll give you a bit more background. In 1989, so here's the 29th of January 1989, someone took me to a church. Now, you got to understand, I grew up Greek Orthodox, and some people think it's awesome what I do, but in my Greek Orthodox world, I'm a Greek Orthodox mother's nightmare. That's all I'm saying. I didn't marry until I was 30. I didn't have my first child until I was 35, and I'm a Pentecostal preacher. It does not get any worse for my mother. And so it's like, really? And people go like, how do you stay real? I'm like, well, let me count the ways. And so when I came to faith in Christ, it cost me everything. My family didn't speak to me for, several years. I couldn't take meals. And when you're in an immigrant community, so Greek in Australia, your community is everything. I didn't even go into an Australian person's home until my late teens. We were just so to lose all of that overnight, to be ostracized, I think I said it last night, when I got saved. And because I didn't know there was a career Christianity. I didn't know, because it cost me everything immediately. And my only paradigm for ministry, because I came from a Greek Orthodox background, was I thought I was going to be Mother Teresa. And of sorts I am, but that was my only thought. You only had that kind of like Catholic and Protestant sort of idea, certainly growing up in Australia. So I thought that was going to do. So immediately, there was just something intuitive in me that you get saved and you help the poor and the marginalised. And not only that, I would have been considered one of those in the, how I grew up. So when I went to, in 1989, a friend took me to a church, and it was like it was a Pentecostal church, and so it was a warehouse. You got to understand, if you know anything about Greek Orthodox, like they don't have church in a warehouse, and so it is like, and I walk in. This is like 1989, so if you're old enough, you remember these are the disco years, the 1980s. Okay, so, and I'm like, there's drums and there's and I'm like thinking like, this is a disco, like this is awesome. I had no idea, and the church I sort of really came to faith in is the Shout to the Lord church. So like I was there. That's my claim to fame. The first time it was sung, before you all heard it here in America. And but something happened, and I truly did encounter, God, there had been a journey like it always is. It was a journey getting to that point, but I'll spare you that. But from the 29th of January, 1989, I would say that for me was the moment. Since then, I've not looked back. It was like I have decided to follow Jesus, and there's no turning back. And so out of that, again, there was, I didn't know what to do. I just sort of thought, I knew that the Lord had called me. I wouldn't have used that language. I told you I thought I was going to be Mother Teresa. Even when I was 5, I used to look around the Greek Orthodox walls, all the pictures of the saints. And I used to say to my mum, Mummy, I want to get my picture on the wall. I wanted to know how to get your picture on the wall, but she told me, like, you had to be killed, so that I didn't want to get my picture. I thought the photo album will do. This is back in those days. It's like, I'll stick to the photo album. And so I had no, but that was like a little kid. But now when I think about it, I think that was sort of somewhere in there the Lord was tugging on my heart. And even in the midst of the abuse and the brokenness and the pain, the Lord had called me to himself. There was a sense of, with all the mess that comes with all that kind of trauma, it was nothing was clean. You'd be, my journey definitely is not clean. People go like, how do you love the loss so much? I'm like, honey, there ain't nothing anyone's done that I haven't done. So it's like, you kind of just remember where Jesus has saved you from. And that's why, he can, if he can do it for me, he can do it for anyone. I've just never lost that. And so when I went, there was sort of like a call to volunteer and serve and clean the church. And this is really how my call happened. And I turned up to the church cleanup day out of the youth ministry. But I was like the only one that turned up out of our group. And the associate youth pastor came and he said, "You're Christine Karyophilus, aren't you?" And that was my maiden name. And so Nick thinks he rescued me, but I like Karyophilus. And so he said, "You're Christine Karyophilus." And I went, "Yes." He goes, You're doing a degree in psychology, aren't you?" Which I wasn't. Psychology was a minor. I was doing a degree in English and economic history. So basically, I read golden books and count to 10. And so I was like, this is what I'm going to do. But I had a psych minor. And at that time, we're in a warehouse. It was like this little church and I was like the only one at uni at America, so college, the only one at college in my, in that small little community. And so he said, "Well, it doesn't matter. We are starting a youth service." I said, "What's a youth service?" He said, "I don't know, but we just got a government grant and I'm going away on a missions trip with the senior pastor for 6 weeks. And so you're the only one that's doing a degree. So when I come back, could you give me a proposal for a youth service?" This is how spiritual it was. I had never, but it was based on a lie. This is back with the dinosaurs. Remember, there were things as pages. Does anyone remember? Okay, so, and I remember he was standing at the top of the warehouse. He had a pager and he threw the pager down. And he said, "Okay, we've got, this is our office." So you called it and it would be like, someone would answer, "Hills District Youth Service, can I help you?" And, so I want you to know that the whole foundation of it was a lie. And so, because there was no office. And so it's like, "Hills District Youth Service, can I help you?" And someone, "Is Christine there?" "No, I'm sorry, she's not in the office." Well, there was no office. And so, now it's 2025. I can say there was. It was virtual. We were just ahead of our time. And so then, but this is back when there were like not cell phones. So you had to dial. Remember those phones where you actually had to exert your energy? And so then I would like pick up one of those phones and go, "Hi, Christine, I just got back into the office." Well, there was none. So I just want you to know that was the foundation of my call. And in that, but what I had done was I had said yes to Jesus. And so I didn't know. Thank God there was no Instagram, there was no TikTok. So I didn't spend my life scrolling through everyone else's life telling Jesus what I wanted him to use me for, what looked really great. But these are old days where you had to go to a prayer closet and hear from God. And God would tell you, you didn't tell God what looked the best in your interest and how you could best serve him for your glory, his glory. And so what was like, God, I'll do anything. So because I said yes, it was like church cleanup day. Okay, that's what you do. It's not like a generation today that would think, oh, no, that's not what I'm called to do. That's not my spiritual gifts. That's not my strength finder. That's not my love language. I'm like, we write Christian books to excuse Christians from being Christians. My love language is die. Unless a person denies it, you deny yourself, take up your cross and follow me, you cannot be my disciple. Like, it's not like I'm giving God the list of what. So, you take a good truth, which is God's given you gifts and there are strengths, and you play into those, and we've just almost created idols to them in that no one's prepared to die and say whatever it takes. And any of us, I'm speaking to a room of practitioners, any of us that are doing the work, no, you do anything. That's it. Like, you're the whatever it takes ministry. Like today I'm the garbologist, tomorrow I'm the preacher. It's just like, and why we're not seeing a whole lot of things done with the generation is because they've confused visibility with significance, and they've confused platform with service. And so you go, unless we start talking about this stuff, we are not going to have a generation of missionaries to send into all the world, because everyone wants to build their platform online and be famous and be an influencer. I'm like, what on earth? There's 20 spiritual gifts, I think, mentioned between Corinthians, Romans, and 2 Peter. And not one of those spiritual gifts have I seen Christian influencer. I don't know. Like, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe, so I'm like, no one's going, I want the gift of helps. I'm so like, and I'm going, if you're a Christian, you have influence. Like, we don't need to brand that and market that. Like, let's just get about the Father's business and go into all the world and make disciples. Until we change that thinking, I'm deeply concerned. And I mean, I speak to young people, as you know, all the time. So I'm just thinking, how can I change even my language? So that, because we're calling people to die. I mean, that's ultimately why we're sitting in this room this morning. That's what Jesus calls us to. There's nothing glamorous there, if we really believe this stuff. And I want to call a generation to purpose, and I want them to lay down their life, and I do believe they'll do exceptional things for the kingdom of God. All of those things, but that doesn't mean becoming famous on TikTok. That's not, necessarily what it could be somebody's call, but it's certainly not everybody's call. So I'm back in those days where, like, yes. I was like, God, here I am, send me. And back, because in my era, I'm so old, we were discipled by martyrs and missionaries, not celebrities. And so you thought the highest honor was you were going to go where nobody else went. That was the whole thinking. You weren't thinking, where am I going to go? What's someone else doing that's really cool so that I could go do it? You're like, God, where is the gaps? And I want to go and meet them. So in my own context, Australia, especially at that time, less than 2% of the population went to church. So everywhere was a mission field. I didn't have to wait to go to Siberia one day. It was like right there. So you sort of thought, schools, that's where kids, how can I get access to schools? And of course, it wasn't America. We didn't have cultural Christianity. I mean, we had to think innovatively. We're going to start programs. So you go to school, what do you need? Anti-bullying seminars or whatever it would be. And so we would write seminars to be able to build relationships with kids. And then you would have kind of events on the weekend that, your normal sort of model, you're building relationships in school, and then you're having an event and able to preach the gospel. So it was old school stuff. But out of that, and so because of that youth centre, it was like, okay, I've got to learn how to do it. So I went to every youth centre in Sydney where I grew up, just to find out, because I didn't know, what does a youth centre do? What are you supposed to do? So I quickly, in 1990, I started doing all of that. We look at where we are as a culture and a society today. Well, in 1990, we were very much moving in all these directions when it comes to now, the things that are the big cultural issues, where that was going there. And so I had to learn then, kind of an Acts 17, look for the pillars to the unknown God back then, because you were schooled in it, because I lived in a secular nation, and it was, America's sort of just catching up to where Australia and Europe has been for, decades. So it isn't anything new. So anyway, as I was working that out, we started the youth centre, and that's where I learned to, write grants, to go and speak I used to fly down every 6 weeks to Canberra, which is like your DC, I guess, the capital of in Australia, and advise the Prime Minister and government advisors on youth policy. I mean, what did I know? But these are like doors God opened. You know, the stuff that I used to think it's like Daniel and Joseph and Esther. And it wasn't cool in the church world then because, you know, you weren't sort of doing what they consider traditional ministry. Now today it's paved the groundwork for so much. But that's where I learned, you know, at that time in 1990, they were arguing about whether to put condom machines in. The debate was whether they should go in the... Back then, you still had very clear delineation between boys and girls. So whether it was going to go into the boys' toilet or into the cafeteria at lunchtime. And so I would sit in these meetings with all these intellectuals with a lot more letters after their name than me that were really highly educated. I don't know how you could be highly educated and so dumb, but anyway, they were like sitting around these tables, and I'm just like old school where you would just pray and read the Bible and I'd sit in the meetings, and in this, I'll tell you, like this one particular meeting, big table, everyone's there. The decision was that they were going to put the condom machines in the boys' toilet. They're thinking they're so smart, you know, like we'd been months and months of dialogue. And Lord have mercy. So, and this is like still, you know, late 80s, early 90s, there's still a lot with the HIV crisis. You know, there was a lot, if you're old enough, you remember those days. So I'm kind of letting them all. This is where I learned to communicate at that level. And I went, oh, well, okay, that's awesome that we've decided to do that. So now, in order to save taxpayer money and so that we don't have to keep meeting like this, maybe now we need to make a decision today, since we've decided that we're going to put the condom machines in the boys' toilet, whether we should make one classroom or two classrooms available before school, during recess, lunchtime, after school. Are we going to put a king-size bed or a queen-size bed in there? Do we put curtains? I mean, I'm straight-faced. Are we going to put curtains on the wall, or are we going to allow voyeurs to look in? Do we roster the teachers on to supervise, or do we... I said, because we're going to... The fact is, because we're going to have the condom machines in the schools, then obviously we're presupposing to have them available, that students will be using them, and then we're going to have a big crisis with, are they going to leave used condoms in the football field, out behind the building? I mean, I'm just talking like straight, you know, the blood's draining from their faces. Anyway, suffice it to say, we never put condom machines in Australian high schools, but I'm saying I learned then that this was gospel work, is what I'm saying. Is like, I would have a very I also was the director of what was called in Australia Youth Alive, large-scale youth events. I guess sort of like your Youth for Christ. I don't know what you had over here, but, you know, you have Christian bands, gospel proclamation, come forward, like old school Billy Graham stuff. So you've got one day, on Friday I'm talking about, you know, condom machines in schools, and Saturday I'm leading kids to Jesus in altar calls, streaming down the aisles. It's like, so to me it was always two sides of the same coin. It was never, is it justice or is it evangelism? I'm like, who said it was that or that? It's like, and so this is what I'm saying. I think I was very blessed not to grow up in American evangelical Christianity, because I didn't know these things were deals. And ignorance is bliss. And so, you know, is it spirit or truth? Both. Do we read the same Bible? Is it male or female? Both? Is it like all these things that are polarized, that people are arguing and yelling? His desperation is a gift. When you're just surrounded by lost people, you're desperate. You're like, you know, do you have a pulse? Is Jesus Lord? Let's go. You know, that's kind of like where you're working, because you beggars cannot be choosers, and you're like, let's make this happen. And it really is only when there is a strong cultural Christianity and a Christian paradigm that you can afford the luxury of spending all day arguing about things that Jesus really never worried about. So, and that's how you lose that fire, I think. And Aussies has still got that fire. Someone said to me, they just came back from Australia, their texts, and they said, we got that kind of rugged thing in common. We really do. It's just like we're pioneer spirit, let's go. And we've never grown up out of a startup, because we've never had a dominant Christian culture. It's so the opposite, that you learn to be in it, but not of it. And you're always living on mission. It's like I didn't need to read 10 books on missional living, because that if you're a Christian, you were just living on mission. There was no subculture you could become a part of, and there was no industry. There was one Christian bookshop. We 5 million people in Sydney. One Christian bookshop, Coorong. And so there wasn't like a Christian book industry, or there's no Christian conference circuit. Like, you were like working, I was working in the abattoirs, checking the pH levels of carcasses so that I could make money to go and speak at youth events. I mean, there was just no other way you were going to make it. It was like pure mission. And thank God, because it shaped and framed me. Now that I'm, I've spent a lot of my time in a whole different world, I know what it's for. And, I know what I'm supposed to do with it. I pray, I hope. And so I think that then that youth center, so I didn't know then, though, that God was preparing me for what he had prepared for me for A21. People are like, how do you run this global organization, services in 22 countries? We've had, I'm only saying this just to give context of where that went. We've had several presidential awards and the Mother Teresa Humanitarian Award. I could go on and on, and what the Lord has done and working with Red Cross and UN. But if I did not start by going down and talking about condom machines in high schools, there's no way I could be having the kind of level of conversations that I'm having today around the world, nor running a global anti-trafficking organisation, and particularly in this volatile culture when I am obviously a very strong and public evangelist as well, and very theologically conservative. That's not how to win friends and influence people in the justice world. And so I'm not far enough there for them, and I'm not far enough there for them, and so I don't fit anywhere. Thank God I got used to that. And we've got to raise a generation up to understand that you do not have to throw out theological integrity in order to do the work of justice in the earth, nor do you have so much legalism that you're not doing the work of justice on the earth. So that, it's kind of like, really, it's that place. But all that was my prep. And so I went from running what became, and still exists in Australia, a very significant community-based youth centre. And then the paradigm in church was that's where we started to do, that was like the community outreach. These were like revolutionary terms in the 90s, like that you would have the evangelistic arm of the youth ministry. People were so nervous that you were, building a youth centre that actually met the needs of community. And I'd have to argue back then, isn't ministry needs-based? Find a need and meet it. Like, this is not rocket science. This is how you build authentic relationships and you meet people's needs. Jesus went about doing good. It's like, do people some good. And earn the right. And particularly because I was already in a very secular culture, you had to earn the right to proclaim the gospel. And so people did not care what you had to say if you were not living it. And that's why last night I started with that text, you'll get power to be my witnesses. And we've confused it with do witnessing. And also we need to do witnessing. But I'm just saying that unless, and especially in America in this hour, unless we're walking in the power to be witnesses, no one is listening to our witnessing because they're looking at our witness and going, peace out. I think I'll become a Buddhist. It seems a bit nicer than that. So out of that then I started, when I say speaking, it was just, people go, where did you learn to speak? Well, I had to hold, 1,000 kids in a public high school in Australia. People go, wow, you do passion and there's 65,000 people. I go, honey, 65,000 people in a Christian event is easy. Try talk to 1,000 Australians that do not want to be in a room. That's where you're going to learn. That's the only time I really know if I'm anointed or not, is like, it's that work. Or if I'm in the back of Bulgaria and we're planting churches in Sofia, because here I could gather a crowd anywhere. There I need the power of God, because otherwise and that's the stuff that keeps me really real going. I know the hand of God's still with me, because sometimes here you go, I think, but when you're out in the back of Warsaw, Poland, or you're back in the work that we do, Moldova, Romania, Albania, Greece, or Thailand, or Cambodia, or all the stuff that we do, it's there that I'm like, Lord, I need you, because there is no infrastructure that can prop me up here. It's got to be God. God has to open doors, and He does. So that's the stuff that keeps me in it. Not the speaking. That's what I want to tell the young people. Is like, you think there's this like career goal to get on a platform. That's just an overflow of the work that is. That's the stuff that keeps me in it and keeps me alive. So that then happened, and then Nick and I got married in 1996. And we didn't know, but we knew that we just wanted to do evangelism and mission. Had no idea. How do you have any idea what that's going to look like ever? Paul thought he knew, and every missionary journey looked different and every context looked different. And so, but we have had that heart, and by God's grace, He's kept that alive in us all that time. And then we started planting churches and working with different networks around the world. And the good thing is, in our experience, on the mission field, it didn't matter that I was a woman. Again, like I said, desperation is a bliss. The only place really it sort of mattered in some places was mostly in North America in the South between the hours of 9 a.m. and 1 p.m. on a Sunday morning. Apart from that, it seemed like it was okay for me to do what God had called me to do. Apparently, that's what Paul must have meant in those texts. He just forgot to put in the exact time and place that wasn't permitted. So in everywhere else, it all worked and God did it, and and again, though, there was no thought that there's any kind of career Christianity. It's just like you're doing what you're doing. And then it was in 2007, I'm standing at the airport in Thessaloniki, Greece. And that's when I had that encounter, saw those posters of the missing children and was preparing that message. It was just in my heart. You wouldn't be sitting in this room if you didn't have moments with God where you knew that you knew. You didn't hear an audible voice, but you may as well have. It was just so, when I felt confronted through that text about you think you're the Samaritan, but you're really the Pharisee, and you're the priest and the Levite. It was just so sobering to me. And I really didn't think, I was 40 and just had Sophia. We're already doing so much mission work. It was like, am I willing to die again? And the challenge with getting older and doing this is the cost more than you did when you're young and dumb. When you're young and dumb, you're like, it's awesome, let's go. But at this point, you're like, wow, this is really going to mean. I've got 2 kids. At that time, Catherine was 4, Sophia was just born. And it was like, wow. I had no idea it would become what it was going to become. But it was like, am I willing all over again to pour my energy, time? Am I willing to die again? And that's what it is. It's like, you got to die daily. That's what, if I could just stand at passion and just give like 2 words to the whole 60,000 people, just die daily. That's it. Like, welcome to the rest of your life. It would make it easy. We'd save 45 minutes having to give a talk and agonize over the, hermeneutics and exegesis. So just like die. That's it. In Greek, Hebrew, and Aramaic, die. And so then it was like, okay, you're going to do this. And so, in that region of the world, at that time, there were no anti-trafficking organizations. And we got consultants to come in and do a feasibility study of that whole region. And Nick went with them. It was 45 days. And then I brought the girls over after that because we were going to meet with the consultants. Because I really felt that strong sense that we were supposed to start in Thessaloniki. I knew nothing. I didn't know what human trafficking was. I didn't even know that it still existed, let alone, and you got to think, 2007, just go back in your mind if you're old enough, Greece was on the verge of economic collapse. You might remember in 2008, they bankrupted the earth. You're welcome. And so it was like that happened there. The church is very embryonic. Any of you that have mission work in that region, you would know that any kind of what we would identify as born again witness there. There are fewer than 10,000 Protestant/evangelical believers in the whole country of Greece, and it just gets even more sparse as you go into other parts of that part of the world. So there's not a strong church. There's a strong Greek Orthodox church presence, but obviously not a strong church. Corruption, obviously, from top to bottom. 0 laws making trafficking illegal at the time. It's Russian and Albanian mafia, and they kill people. And so it was like not, I wasn't like that thrilled to do that. And I remember sort of having this moment, which I'm sure we've all had, I'm standing there with the Lord going, but God, I've just had a baby, but God, I'm 40, but God, I live in Australia. That's like really far from Greece, but God, this is like, there's no money. I don't have a spare 10 million bucks, but God, I don't, how we start our list of as if we have to remind the Lord of why we can't do what he's called us to do. We have a precedent for it. Remember Moses when he's talking, by the time you're talking to a burning bush, I think God could do anything. At that point, I'm always like, I would love a burning bush because then I would have even more faith and go, okay. I'm like, Moses, you're having this dialogue with a tree. You've either been smoking something here in California or anyways. So he then, but he's having this dialogue and then the Lord says, I'm going to rescue my people. I'm sending you. And Moses is like, but God, I am not eloquent and I'm slow of speech. And I'm thinking, God's thinking, And that was going to be the deal breaker on parting the Red Sea. If you were just more eloquent, I would be able to do that. That's like, I mean, what am I going to do? Thaddeus, what are we going to do? Anyway, so I'm thinking, with me, it's the same thing. Like, Peter, did you know she was a woman? But did you know Bartholomew that she just had a baby? Did we have a, I mean, we treat him as if he doesn't know, because we've got all our, but I had that moment, but God. And it was like, really, am I going to have the faith to go again? Because that's what it really comes down to. It's faith. And that's what I think as we're looking at this generation coming through, that's my prayer. And every time I speak and every time I'm in that context, and I'm increasingly, because so few people now are talking about evangelism and mission, because, we've had all the negativity that somehow it's not good for the world, which is the only good for the world. And then there's about 5 of us that still believe it, and we're all in this room. And so my thing is that with the platform God's given me, I want to really call a generation to lay down their life and to go into all the world and make disciples of all nations and be unapologetic, like just unapologetically go, this is good news and there is no better news. And yes, there is a heaven and there is a hell. And yes, there is, we're going to be in eternity a lot longer than we're in time. And what you do with time matters in light of eternity. And I want to call a generation to that again, because this last 10 to 15 years, the shift, we've lost so many of them because of that shift away and all the negativity that comes with, evangelism and mission. And justice is a part of it, but I'm unapologetic about evangelism. Like, people have to get saved. And so, yes, we do the work that we're doing. And obviously, I run a global anti-trafficking organization, so of course I believe. But that in and of itself is not the answer. We can see, social justice, the way we've gone down that road, I'm like, man, we had a Reformation. Didn't you realize that good works was never going to get you to heaven? And we've just got a 2.0 version of that with what's happening on the earth today. And we've got a generation thinking that if they just do the right, because it's got to be the trendy social justice cause for this week, so if they do the right good works, somehow they're going to get saved. And I'm like, sweetheart, it's still Jesus. It's just Jesus. So I want those things to go together, and somehow in our life and ministry we've kept it together at the highest levels. Done some dancing, no doubt about it, and it's like landmines you've got to dance around in certain parts of the world, but you've got to be wise as a serpent and gentle as a dove. And just look at how Paul did it. He preached very differently when he preached on the Areopagus, when he preached at Mars Hill, as he did when he was giving, an address in Paphos on his first missionary journey. It was just so interesting going through Paul's sermons in Acts again, going, man, you just knew where you were, but you never compromised, but you knew exactly where you were and said what needed to be said. And so just to, again, awaken that in young people. So we started A21 and hired a lawyer in Greece. I didn't know then it was the, parking lot of human trafficking in Europe. That's a UN quote. And then little did I know that just a couple of years later, 89% of all the Syrian refugees that would cross over into Europe would cross over 45 minutes north of our headquarters in Thessaloniki into Macedonia, and then into the Schengen zone, into Europe. God just knows. And so they had kicked all the NGOs out of Greece at the time, because there was just, like so often happens, people trying to make money off it. It got worse. But the only organisations that were allowed to work at that time with those 89% of the Syrian refugees coming over was the UNHCR, Red Cross, and A21. And A21 built the whole area, the whole crossover zone. We pumped water in, we had showers, so much of the literature to help educate, because obviously who's the most vulnerable when it comes to trafficking? It's refugees, because women and children, no one's really looking for them. And so they are so vulnerable. So that was phenomenal, and I never would have known God would have done that. And out of that, that's where the Mother Teresa Award came, that then opened so many doors in that whole region of the world, as only God does. Like, we've got to teach a generation. How do you plan for that? I don't know. You don't sit down and go. So then young people might see that and think, I want to do that. And I'm like, are you willing to go to the church cleanup day and start serving there, which is going to lead, if you don't see the connection between those two things, then you're not going to be in it for the long haul. You're not going to get to 59 and still be passionate and not have settled and go and have been married by God's grace for 30 years, have 2 kids and go, I'm going to tap out now, but I'm going to keep going and doing that. And I'll end with this, and you can ask me whatever questions. I know I've rambled, but it is more interesting than the sermon. And I'll give you the link to the sermon that I was going to preach, and so you can have that. And it's really good. I got it double checked. It's very, okay, God, if I'm coming here, it better be theologically sound. So the thing is that when the first person, and I'm just saying that story, and if you go online, you can see the A21 shipping containers that we set up. But I say that story for this reason, and really, if I drove here, here's the heartbeat of what keeps me going and doing what I'm doing. When we hired a lawyer in Greece, we didn't even know what we were doing. But again, it's the God stuff, and you all could give me 1,000 of your own stories of, in your context where you go, I know and God knows that was God. You could not make that happen, and how that person got saved and what happened. And so there was, we had 14 girls that were in one of our aftercare freedom centres in Thessaloniki at the time. And it's like a UN meeting every time, because you've got girls from Uzbekistan, you've got girls from Albania, Romania, and you've got to have interpreters for everything. And I'll tell you 2 stories so you can see the extent of how this has always worked in our life. I had just had this sense. I woke up one day, again, you can't make this stuff up, and I was thinking of the Stand Nations. I'm in my quiet time, and God puts different things on your heart. And so I just sort of said to all of our network, let's pray for the Stand Nations. And, if you say all those countries really fast, even if you're a cessationist, you'll speak in tongues. It's like amazing. It's like there's, it's awesome. And so all that is happening. And and there had not been recorded in that region of the world one rescue. Now remember, when I talk about our rescues and the 6,000 men, women and children that have gone through that, these are legal cases that that's how we count our survivors and in A21. So it's people that we've represented legally in some capacity that you can taste it, not just because we've helped a lot more people than that, but that's like people that have gone right through the system. And so I felt just the Stand Nation. So that was Monday. And then on Wednesday, 3 days later, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I get a report that 7 women from Uzbekistan had come into, the police had done a raid and had come into the aftercare facility. So this is where you cannot separate even prayer, right? Everyone's praying. And this is their story. And they said, we had been praying. They'd been in captivity court in northern Greece for a year. And they said, we had been praying to Allah to rescue us. And, nothing had happened. And she goes, and then I remembered my grandmother said there was a God of Europe. And the God of Europe, his name was Jesus. So I said to him on Monday, this is the same day. This is where you can't make this stuff up. I said to him, Jesus, the God of Europe. May that be prophetic anyway. But so, yes. We won't get sidetracked right now. Jesus, the God of Europe, if you are real, then would you rescue us? And then, 2 days later, the police go in, they get rescued, and they're in our Freedom Center. And so, of course, this is the Lord going, Chris, prayer does really make a difference. I mean, there are some things that not the only thing, but you cannot take this out of the equation and have just good programs and just good systems. This stuff actually really matters, that we really do believe that prayer actually does, that we're not just going through the motions, but this is what sets us apart. And I could give you probably 1,000 of those stories over 18 years, and where people go, man, how's A21? I'm thinking, honey, it's God. That is the secret sauce. That is, it's prayer and operating in the gifts of the Spirit, because you need them when you're operating. God, you've got to give me wisdom. You've got to give me insight. You've got to give me a word of knowledge here. You've got to, you need God. We can't do what we're called to do without him. I think woven into the very fabric of our calling is the impossibility to do our calling without God. He's just thought, you know what, I'm just going to make it impossible, just so you know it's always me. No matter how gifted, talented, educated or resourced you think you are, we need God. That's why we're in this chapel, in this church, doing a missions conference this morning, and we're not just out in some secular sitting around a round table at the UN talking about how we're going to solve the world's problems. So let's keep God in it, is what I'm saying, and keep our utter dependence on him. But there was another girl from North Africa that was telling me how she had come and she had been trafficked with 60 other young women from North Africa in a shipping container. They didn't know it was going to be that, normal trafficking story, promised a better life. There's a guy there that's like an agent. I got you a job. I've got all the normal stuff. Give me your passports. Give me your papers. And which is also very hard to prosecute, to prove that someone was brought against their will when they have papers, because they've done paperwork to get visas to be able to come. I mean, that's a whole other complexity that you've got to work with and educate judges and law enforcement and the legal profession about how this stuff happens. Anyway, so they turn up at the dock thinking they're going to get, in a ship, and whatever excuse is given, the only way we can get you is in this shipping container. By that time, you've come from some village in the back of nowhere. You're like, okay, you're trusting this person. So 60 of the girls go in. When they opened the shipping container in Istanbul, 30 of the 60 girls had suffocated. The oxygen filtration system in the thing had malfunctioned, and 30 of them. Just imagine the trauma of that, right? Just, you can't even. Then, and this would be very normal, is men came in to take the girls out, and they were dressed in law enforcement uniforms. They weren't police officers, but so you imagine the fear. Now, you don't know what language, you don't know what country you're in. 30 of your friends are dead, and now what looks to you as police are coming in. Took them into apartments very close there to the docks in Istanbul, and raped them so many times in a day. Very little water, very little food, obviously to break them down to just how this whole thing works through fear and terror. Then they put those girls, I'm sure you saw so many of those kind of rubber boats that brought the refugees over to Greece, so would put them on them to take them into a brothel in Athens. But what happened in this particular case, the Greek Coast Guard was coming through that part of the Aegean, and so the traffickers wouldn't get caught with the girls on the boat. They threw them overboard. Now I want you to picture North African girls that about the only water they'd seen is walking 20 miles to get water in a well, so they're not no one can swim. So 25 of those 30 drowned. And by the time the rescue happened and the girls ended up in our, Freedom Centre, there was 5 left. So it was everything you're imagining in terms of trauma. She's telling me this story. And honestly, I thought, if I was not hearing this with my own ears, right, I would not even believe in the 21st century this is happening. And, it was so interesting. I say that to go full circle when it came to the refugees, that those same not those very same, but metaphorically speaking, those containers that were used to, take girls to Istanbul and just the horror and the trauma, we were able to repurpose them and fit them with showers and set them up all over for the refugees that were coming through. And you just think God could even redeem that. I remember just weeping as we were setting them up, because I thought, only you could go to such detail to see something turned around. But I say that to say this. Next to this girl, as she's telling me this story, there was a young, early 20s, a young girl from Georgia, as in up near Russia, Georgia. And she, they have to learn some Greek for the brothels, they're working there. And so thick Russian, Georgian accent. And so she says to me in Greek, because Greek is my first language, she says to me, "Why are you here?" Now, she'd only been rescued a couple of days before, and as you can imagine, when they first come into a Freedom Centre, they don't know if we're even traffickers. Like, is this just another setup? Are we setting them up ready to take them somewhere else? So there is zero trust, and nor should there be. At that point, the first week, you're just trying to earn some kind of trust and create a safe environment. And she goes, "Why are you here?" And so then in Greek, I begin to tell her about my own background and my own story, and I felt this is, and I don't always do it like this, but in this context I really felt it was right to talk about the abuse of my background and how I grew up and the abandonment in the hospital when I was born, and, you know, my adoption, and that, you know, and I really started to talk about encountering Jesus and the love of Jesus and what he had done for me, and that he healed me. And I mean, I'm you know, talking about the love of God, the grace of God, the mercy of God, and the same God that did it for me, you know, that is available and ready and willing to do it for her. And as I'm telling her all of this, you know, I mean, I'm like Billy Graham 2.0. Like, we are there. We've got everything, and we've got the crucifixion and the resurrection and the, you know, and the burial and the resurrection and the ascension. I mean, we're in, and God loves you and all this. And I just will never forget. And this is what still gets me out of bed at 59 years old, this far into everything. She yells at me, you know. I mean, I'm going for it, and she's like, "Stop talking! Stop talking! Stop talking!" And then she said to me, "If what you are telling me about your God is real, if this is true about your God, then why didn't you come sooner?" And I'm telling you, to this day, why am I here in the back of Waco, Texas, talking to? Really, it's that. Then why didn't you come sooner? And I mean, I don't know. Have you ever seen the Schindler's List? You know, that point where they're trying to give him an award, and he takes off his ring and he goes, "This could have been, you know, or the car was 10 more people. This ring could have." It was, you know, you have, again, those moments in your life where it was almost like I was before the judgment throne of Christ. Not for salvation, but I'm talking about, you know, when we're all going to be judged based on what we did. People forget that. Like, you know, I probably need to do a passion talk on that. Is that there is, on the other side, we're going to give an account for the life that we lived here on earth. What did we do with our gifts and talents and resources and our time and our treasure? All of that. And it was like, fast forward, it was like, what am I going to say to God? Like, I don't know, my nail appointment was too important, or, you know, the extension on my house. It was just, you don't have a whole lot of moments like that in your whole life, but boy, you can mark it when it is like, for a moment, you're kind of stepping this side of the veil where you realize how temporal some of the things that I really thought mattered, where you really, really know, which is, who knows what it's going to be like on the other side. But I think that moment of where you go, nothing else really matters. Like, nothing matters than proclaiming the gospel and seeing people come into the kingdom of God and get saved and delivered and healed and all that comes with salvation. And I just remember I grabbed, you know, I took a hand and I'm bawling. And I said to her, "Honey, I really can't think of one really good excuse. I really can't. But I do promise you this, as long as I'm alive, I will be wherever I go. I will tell people you exist, and we will come and find you. We will come." It was just this moment that you can almost package and go, "I'll take that into eternity with me." And it's what somehow has helped stop me from settling or thinking I've arrived or seeking comfort and ease. Not that I'm not tempted, just like every other human on this earth, but by and by, when I put my head on the pillow at night and Nick and I are talking, it's like, what else are we going to do? Like, what else are we going to do with this one and only life that we have? But continue to do that. And so that really is what drives us. And so out of that, you know, we've been doing it 37 years in terms of the broader mission and evangelism. So our networks and our relationships worldwide have just meant, and the fact that I'm still around has given me a lot of credibility. And so a thing that I'm very passionate about, obviously, as well with that, is creating pipelines and pathways for women to really step into their God-given purpose wherever they are, in all over the world. And I'm talking from the girls in townships in South Africa to the slums in Brazil to, you know, business corporate executives that would be like women in Luke chapter 8, you know, verse 3, where it says the women that traveled with Jesus, and Joanna, the wife of Chusa, I mean, he's got the whole list, who funded him out of their own means. And I'm like, while everyone's arguing about what can a chick do, I'm like, oh, everything. I like, have a look, you know, I want to raise up women that are multi-gazillionaires that understand they can fund the kingdom of God, and they're in it for the sake of the kingdom, and women that, you know, everything from being a homemaker, full-time, homeschooling 20 kids, but on mission. mission, understanding, well, like, if you're in that area to, whatever you might want to do, go on a foreign mission field or be, just to live missionally wherever you are. And so we have lots of different things to sort of help equip and empower women. And, of course, does that look different for our sisters in Iran than it does for our sisters here in America? Yes. And so understanding and being cognizant of the world, what's it like in Asia and South America and Africa. But it's sort of, I think the better pipelines and pathways that we can create. Psalm 68:11, it's a messianic psalm, but it says that there'll be a mighty throng of women in the last days that are going to proclaim the word of God. And I'm not talking about preaching on a Sunday morning. I'm not even in that debate. I'm talking about empowering women to be witnesses that we have seen. They traveled with Jesus and were witnesses. They were there at his burial. They were there at the resurrection. They were the first women. Go and tell the disciples and Peter that Jesus is like, I'm entrusting this to you. Paul, all in Romans 16, you just see women, and now just teaching Acts again. It was so cool. He's teaching in Berea, and the prominent women of the city are there, and he's teaching. He's in Corinth, and there's Priscilla and Aquila, and then over in Ephesus, Priscilla is helping Apollos, who's really well educated. And I'm like, listen, this is not a deal. When it comes to the work of mission, if you've got a pulse and you believe Jesus Christ rose from the dead and is the only way to God, let's go. And so, I think that works well. So that's why I'm not really engaged in any of the other arguments. I just do it and bug everyone. But, but I don't engage in the arguments of it because my goal is not that. Because it's got to work, It's not going to happen in my lifetime in Afghanistan or Iran. So I'm not out to try to, I'm like, wherever you are on the theological spectrum, let's just get you living on mission wherever you are. And, the Holy Spirit is the one that gives us all agency and power to be witnesses. So you might not have a pathway in your tradition, but the Holy Spirit is the one that gives us power to be witnesses. So if I can help connect those dots and then get the right education to whoever needs to get it, that's what we want to do. So really, I'm 59, so I'll be 60 a year from now, and I'm hoping that the next decade will be the most fruitful decade of really, really helping, should the Lord tarry, who knows, but if he does, of creating those kind of pipelines around the world. And for some reason, still at this point, young people are still listening to me. I have a 23-year-old and a 19-year-old, so maybe that's it. It has to be God because, I'm not cool. I don't have any tattoos. I don't sing or nothing, so I'm not. So, when I stand there, I've got nothing to pull out of the hat. It's like I have to be anointed. That's about it because there is no other reason for anybody to listen to me. So, while I have their ear, and now, finally, the old people think maybe she's still there, she's still married, her kids seem to like God, and she's, they used to think I was like kind of really radical because, I'm a woman and I preach and, I do justice. And now, though, I'm a conservative poster child because I haven't moved on any of the major issues. It's like, no, I've always believed that and I'm still there. So I think now we're getting to a point where, I can help bridge some of that generational thing. And, you just live long enough and everyone dies. So, at the end of the day, I'm just outliving some people. So there's that. So you just kind of go, that's why you're not going to see me losing sleep on social media about all this, is what I'm saying. It's like, really, it's okay, they're going to die. So you just keep going and doing what God's called you to do. I know this is the very pragmatic Australian. Okay, that's it. I tell you, I'm the most pragmatic Pentecostal you'll ever meet. I'm really a Baptist-costal, but so I'm that'll make you feel better. But I'm the most pragmatic one you will ever meet. So I guess that really is, I don't know if that's the workshop you came for, but I just wanted to give you some of that. That is what fuels me. That is what happens. So it's 11:30. We've got about 20 minutes. If you want to ask me any questions, because I would love that, and I can answer. And we'll go 1, 2, we'll get that. Yep.
If you could talk just quickly about the Global Freedom Summit. Maybe.
Which is awesome. We just had it. I don't know if you follow me, you might have seen that I've been talking a lot about the Global Freedom Summit for 821. It started last Saturday. We launched with 700 viewings in 85 countries. I would encourage all of you. It's easy, it's free. Go to a21.org, and it's a 45-minute film that we've put together that is really, really exceptional. Thank you. And you can just download on your phone, and watch it anywhere. But my goal is online child exploitation is the number one thing. It was like I'm going, what is the one thing? Because people could switch off. If I talk about, trafficking in our offices in Cambodia, Thailand, or Africa, or South America, or even Greece or Bulgaria, people are like, yeah, that's over there. But the one thing that is everywhere in every country because of this is online child exploitation, and it is huge. And it's huge here in America. And so we have put, number one, I want to educate not just parent, anyone that's in contact with young people, to say we got to get our heads out of the sand and we got to know about this. And we have really produced a compelling film, documentary, and it's not boring. You won't get bored. It'll happen, and you can show your kids or young people. If you have anything to do with young people, please get them to watch it, because a lot of people think this is just happening in this community or that community, but it's happening upstairs while your kids you think are doing homework. I could tell you story after story of how many people slip into your kids' DMs, and how many kids are sending naked pictures of themselves to each other and then being threatened that this is going to be sent out to all your school friends and end up committing suicide. This is like not a joke. I could tell you every day there are these stories and how it happens. So this is, I think we've given you the most up-to-date information in a way that the young people will also be really engaged, because in this way, education and awareness and knowing what to do when it happens. We have different programs we have in schools, and which you can look up online too, that are all sort of been approved. We worked nearly 10 years getting them approved in all 50 states, elementary school and high school. But we showed some of this in schools. We did a beta test with 13 schools in Michigan. I don't know if anyone's here from there, but in one of them, there was a little elementary schoolgirl that went up to a teacher after this, and she goes, that's happening to me. My daddy said that we don't have any money, and if I would let him take pictures of me, and so we would get money. I could tell you, you just kind of cringe and go, and this was quite an upper class area in Michigan. This is like, another girl was, why Sally's not at school, from high school, she was 14, wasn't at school today because, she's gone to meet whoever, this person at the airport, that they built a relationship online. Anyway, because the teacher, and again, knowing how to report things the right way, where to go and what's a good next step is really important when you're trying to prosecute, because you need the evidence to be done in a certain way so that you can do that. Well, to cut a long story short, the teacher knowing what to do, we got the FBI involved, and this guy could be a trafficking because he came in from another state, and he wasn't just, he wasn't like a 17-year-old boy online. He was a man, and he had 14 other girls from schools in Michigan waiting that he was going to take them, and that he'd been grooming online for over a year. The story you'll see in the Freedom Summit, that has to be, of course, we have to be very protective, but the backstory to all that is that kid, 15-year-old boy, he ended up taking his life. It was horrible because he thought he was building a relationship with a girl, and they're so vulnerable there. Like, they do dumb choices, and then it just all go. And so this is why we have to get good at talking about this, because if they've got too much shame to tell us what's going on, is it dumb? Yes, it's dumb. Is it happening a lot? Yes, it is. So we've got to really help to mitigate this. And so he, when it was all tracked back, the woman that he thought he was having the relationship with was a 57-year-old man living in London who had, we got this case in court now, 108 other boys that he was doing this to, 108. And so, I could just tell you story after story. I say all that to go, please watch it, like 45 minutes when and then think about, who do I need to share this with and who needs to see it? I think you'll find, I don't think I'm just making it up, it's engaging enough that you'll go, oh, okay, I can really share this. And really any of our Can You See Me films, we've done them at a quality, and you'll see if you go online, they've all got like London Film Festival Awards, Prague Film Festival Awards, Cannes Film Festival. They're done at that quality and really engaging so that people can actually watch them. And it's real. It is a bit confronting, but not inappropriate, but we freak out because we're kind of in the Christian bubble a bit, but for what people are watching every single day, it's not, seriously, it's it's fine. Your kids are watching worse. So I would, I would just say it is really happening like that, and we just need to, if the more we can get our heads out of the sand and talk about it then the more we'll be able to stop some of this stuff happening. I think this is the one thing of all the things we've done in 18 years that truly can move the needle a little bit on all of this. Okay. It was all about that? You're all awesome. It's like, I could talk on and on, but because it's all online and, you can research that yourself, and it is really good and so accessible, and so something you can show.
Where do you find that?
A21.org, and then it'll be just, I'm sure it's right up the front, Global Freedom Summit, yeah. I haven't looked at the website, I'm thinking, because I've been sending the links to everyone, so A21.org. It would still be, because all the month of October, there's watch parties all over the world, and so who knows, but I truly do think there'll be hundreds of millions of people that have, I've seen the initial numbers come in from just what has happened in the last 3 days, how many viewings, because you can track it right through, and it's astronomical. So I'm hoping, with all of that it'll continue, and we're really trying. Of course, everything is online nowadays, so we are shifting. And again, to be 59, and I live in a world where I was born and raised when there was no internet, and so it's just, again, when I say die daily, you go, okay, here we go again, and surround myself with young people and go, I'm on a learning curve all over again. But if we're committed to this work, I can't use yesterday's methods in today's world. So the fact is that we've got to make it happen. Yes, sir, sorry.
What are some practical steps that you have discovered or proclaimed from a global perspective that might help us combat this mindset of cultural Christianity retreating and pietism and holiness?
Yes.
And avoiding what we've got to engage.
Yeah, it's a great question. People like you standing up and addressing it, that would be the best. It's got to come from within. There's only so much I can do outside of that. Like you could say and ring the alarm bells, but the more it's done from within, that's where change really, really happens. And someone's just got to have the courage to go, this is what's happening. Say like a viewing. I remember in the early days when I started talking about A21, or sex trafficking, or just human trafficking, because forced labour is even more than sex trafficking. And I could tell that sort of piety, holiness culture got very nervous. Now, I would always go, and I would have conversations, I go, the only reason you would not want me to talk about this is either you're watching porn or you've got something going on in your own life, because I can't fathom why you would not want to protect the vulnerable in your flock, like the way that would not be. I would never do it inappropriately. I would never. So that's almost what we've got to say is like Paul, when he was speaking in to the Corinthians, he engaged and talked about sexuality and sex, like all the issues of the day. He didn't come away from it. And I think we've got to get back to that and go, let's go right back to Acts again. Let's go in Corinth, which is highly sexualized culture. I mean, nothing that we're not dealing with today. Did Paul speak to this? Yes. And would it have been a little bit disruptive to, if the people in the synagogue that were trying to hide, maybe, I guess. So we're always going to have to be willing. That's my thing. And I feel like the medium is the message, and I've kind of been doing that for the last 37 years, is just going, okay, of course I'm never thinking inappropriate, but the fact is half the deconstruction movement is because of what happened with the purity culture, because we were sort of too scared, created this counter, and were weird about it. And so my thing is that if we can be in it but not of it, and learn the language of the Chaldeans better than they speak it in that sense, and like Daniel did, and try to. There is a generation coming through that they are talking about it. I mean, with the advent of TikTok and Instagram, honestly, tell the people that are resistant, I'm like, let's just spend 5 minutes scrolling through TikTok, and I'm just going to let you see what this generation is talking about. And it's not unholy. We need to be more holy than ever, of course. But confusing holiness with legalism are two different things. And I think that's what we've got to show people, that when Jesus sent us, he sent us to be holy as they are holy, but it's an attitude of the heart. So what I have and what I contend with is a religious Pharisaical spirit, and they're watching porn, but man, we're not going to talk about sex in church. And I'm like, oh yes, because of what you're doing outside of church. But if your heart is pure, and most of the things in Scripture, it talks about our language and our heart attitude and greed and slander and guile and envy and all of those sorts of things. And I'm thinking, you're so angry and you're gluttonous and you slander and I watch you online, but let's not discuss it's almost we've got to be honest enough to go, you know what, let's talk about what is unholy in the scripture. And it's got a lot to do with our heart attitude. And that's what I'm seeing here. It's not got to do with how we talk about either sex trafficking or this sort of being separate. Jesus said, be in it but not of it. He didn't say, be of it but not in it. And truly what we've done is created this Christian culture that is not in the world, but it's totally of the world. Same greed, same lust, same envy, same gossip, same slander, same gluttony, same, all the things, except we've got our own little social construct called the Christian, ecosystem. But it's exactly the same as the world. It takes a lot more courage to be in this thing, but not of it. And to be able to engage with it, but keep your heart pure. And to continue to be holy. Sanctification is crucial. But what we have is, in the Christian culture, a lot of people are not committed to sanctification because they're doing exactly what the world's doing, just slapping a Jesus label on it. And I'm like, you think he doesn't see that? And truly, it's like it's a game. But we're always going to contend with that because it's always been there from the beginning. So you have to somehow die to self. It's like by playing that game, could I be really embraced by some circles of the Christian culture? Yes. But have I been called to a lost world? Yes. So am I willing to be misunderstood by these people to reach this people? That's what it comes down to consistently. And God doesn't make it any easier. And and I wish he did, but he won't. And maybe that's the thorn in our flesh that keeps us real and keeps us in it. I am so misunderstood over here because I'm really committed to being over here. And that tension, Paul, anyone that's done mission and evangelism, and of course our greatest example is Paul in the book of Acts, has had to contend with that. And a legalistic, external piety culture is going to do everything they can to protect that. Because you have to really change. And in America and in the South, that goes really deep. Because you've got decades, hundreds of years of that kind of culture. And then when you want to really live full on in the world but not of it, man, that's when you're going to get challenged. But to be sort of a lukewarm, cultural Christian that plays the game, says the right thing, looks like you're living, Jesus talked a lot about that outside of the cup, didn't he? So I'm just going but what we faced, especially in the last 10 years, is a big shaking of all of that, as you all know, because the Lord's like, I'm done. And the thing will probably still exist, but whether you're going to be part of it is your decision. It's like, and that's why we're seeing what we're seeing on university campuses and little, as I travel, you just see bits of revival everywhere, but it's always messy. And often the ones that want to hang on to the cultural Christianity, man, they're going to hang on to it and they're going to just condemn and judge what's going on over here all the time, while most of what they are accusing that of is happening right here. And Jesus talked about that too, didn't he? So it's like better to take the plank out of your own eye than to look at the log in everybody else's. So anyway, I'm saying all that to go, you just got to smile. Maybe I've just gotten too old to care. But you go, I spent too many years trying to I say that, sir, because I spent so many years trying to change that, and go, this somehow the container, whereas I had to understand when Isaiah said, behold, I do a new thing. Do you not perceive it? In Isaiah 43, he said, I'm building rivers in the desert. And so he was saying to those, or prophesying to those that were in Babylonian captivity, when he said, forget the former things. Now, don't forget, all the way through the Torah, he'd been saying, there's this thing of, do not forget I brought you out of Egypt. Remember that I brought you out of slavery into... Okay, so you've got, all through Deuteronomy, do not forget, do not forget, do not forget. Then all of a sudden you get to Isaiah 43 and it says, forget the former things. And you're like, is God schizo? Like, what is going on? Yeah, And of course, that's not what he's saying. He's saying, you are spending so much time talking about the first Exodus, which was awesome, that you're missing what it is that I want to do in your midst right at this moment. So the last, from the first Exodus, of course, I parted the Red Sea. When you went into the Promised Land, the River Jordan was pushed back. So you walked on dry land into what I had for you. But this one's going to look totally different when you're coming back from what I'm going to do to get you out of Babylonian exile. Now you're going to find rivers in the desert. It's going to be so different. And I think how it's going to look now is if we just look at how the revival happened back then, that's not how God's going to do it. He says, I'll do a new thing. Jesus says, be careful. You can't pour new wine into old wineskin. Now, he's not saying all the old wineskins are bad either. He's saying, but if you try to do that, you're going to destroy the integrity of both. And so basically you're going to spill. The wine is what's important, of course. That's what's going to be spilt. So what I've done is instead of trying to go, I'm going to change the old wineskin, I can't. The parts of as any old wine, an old wineskin, and you're all Baptist, so you wouldn't know this. So the old wine is the best wine in that sense. But if the wine has gone off, if the wineskin's gone off, it's not good for anything. It's terrible. So there is some of that structure, it's just gone off and you're not going to be able to change it, but there's no point trying to pour your new wine into that. But there is some really good, like it's just, yes, is it old in form, but man, it's still good wine is in there. The wine of God is in there and it's good and you go, awesome. But there'll always be new wineskins that are being formed to have the new wine. And so that's kind of where I'm working. You've got to just decide. There are some old wineskins I'll go and work with because I go, oh no, this is still good wine and it's kingdom. There's others that I think, no, there's just nothing happening there. And then you don't disregard the new wineskin that God, and a lot of people just can't get, they think it's got to be this or this. But Jesus never said it was this or this. He says, they both can co-work. And for those of us that are getting older, I'm always trying to find where's the new wineskin? What is God doing? Because there are some of that legalistic piety, it's just not going to change. You're not going to get, here's the costal side of my baptism. It's a religious spirit, and you just cannot contend with that. Jesus, Paul, he was casting them out left, right, and centre. For those of us that still believe we do not battle against flesh and blood, but powers and principalities, then there are some things that you just go, that I'm just not going to change it. They're just stuck in that. And then you kind of find out 10 years later there was a whole lot of darkness happening underneath a lot of that. And I just don't want any part of it. And particularly because of the work that I do, you just see so many that have this external piety. And my gosh, if you see the child porn on their computers that we're then, prosecuting them for and think, but you're standing up there as a deacon on a Sunday looking holier than thou and condemning your children and causing so much damage. So whenever there is that unflinching, legalistic, mean spirit, I'm always, there's something behind that. Yes, they've got to be serious. Okay, sorry, sir, you just asked me a nice question about that. Okay, I've got about 3 minutes because then at 12 o'clock your time, I've got to be on a Zoom call, so it's 11:48. Yes, sir, I'm sorry.
I wasn't sure if I should ask this.
Yes, okay, you've got a loud enough voice. Yes.
I wasn't sure I should ask this question, but you brought up the illustration of the wineskin. And that's what I was thinking about, the biblical metaphor example of who we are, and we want the new wine in us, and we don't necessarily want to be an old wineskin. But the way I felt the last few years, and maybe it's my age, and I thought when I got to this point I wouldn't necessarily feel this way, but I feel more like a colander. You know what a colander is, right? Everyone knows what a colander is. I feel like every day it's like I've got to get filled again because I leak.
Oh, totally.
And I'm hoping I have enough wine for the day,
Totally.
and I make it till I go to bed at night, and all. But I don't necessarily see that illustration in Scripture. Like obviously it's not Italian. I mean, it's more Italian maybe for pasta and whatnot.
No, yeah, I don't know that colander, but Jesus is give us today our daily bread. I would just think that it's inherent in the Lord's Prayer because, and this sense that I would do. Everything is daily, and we forget that because we get so good with our systems and structures and methods and education that we forget I need today's grace for today. And that I think if that's the only way you can stay missional in your life, because ultimately that is the only way we're going to, and we're too scared to pour it all out because we think I've got to hold on to some, and it's like, number one, it's not mine. And Jesus is, the Spirit, he says, in you, out of you will flow rivers of living water, which is what I think this revival is going to look like. And but because the rivers of living water is not us, it's him, he never runs out. He's not like have a piece of pie and there's none left. So it's like it's that river, but you've got to go to him every day. So that's why, to me, the spiritual disciplines are important, but not as a means of escape. Again, it's not like we're Benedictine monks up in there, like just me and Jesus. Like, I'm like, honey, they are, a method for me to get to God so that he can fill me. So it's not like, you're so legalistic, you have a quiet time. I'm like, honey, I wouldn't get through today if I didn't read the word. And if I don't do it out of legalism to earn brownie points with God. I do it so that God will fill me afresh because I need him. And what happens with a cultural Christianity is you set up all systems and structures and you institutionalize and bureaucratize and creedalize your Christianity to the point that Jesus' spirit is not even in it anymore, and you could just have the form of it. But you're relying then on the system rather than the Spirit of God. And, you see it in lots of places around the world. You see everywhere you silence the voice of the Spirit, you silence the voice of women as well. Those two things go together, Spirit and women. And we do serve a triune God. And it needs to become more than just something we say in our doxology. Bless you in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And when Jesus said, you will receive power, it's because we need it. If we didn't need it, why would we receive it? Why would he bother giving us the same Spirit that raised him from the dead if we didn't need that? And so I think that kind of Spirit empower, that when you realize that you have that, you can be a colander because you don't care. I'm empty and here I go again, because you just don't run dry. But when you don't have that thought and you sort of, in your theology, have a triune God, but in your practice, it sort of stops at Jesus, then you're freaking out. And you're really, I've got boundaries and I've got to be really careful because I'm not going to have enough for tomorrow. And I already know I'm not, but he does. So I start the day, when people go, you start in deficit. Okay, yep, yes. But we've used it as an excuse as to not, step in. And I'm going, either I really believe that no eye has seen, no ear has heard, nor has it entered into the heart the things that God has for those that love him. So that means his Spirit's going to, can take me way beyond anything that I can imagine. And God in me can do exceedingly abundantly above and beyond anything I could ever ask, hope, or think, according to the power, that works in me. So it's not according to my gift or talent. And that takes the pressure off, I think, in lots of ways. So I already know I'm not enough. Not as an excuse to do nothing. Some of that theology's going around at the moment. Oh, yes, so we're just like nothing, and so let's do nothing and kumbaya with nothing, and let's embrace our limits and our finiteness. I'm like, okay, you can have that here, and then I serve a God who is able to do exceedingly, abundantly, above and beyond. And so I think that, again, it's like everything. We want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and just go, it's a bit of both. So I think my time's up. Is there anything pressing that I could do to serve you in any other way? Y'all are awesome. I'm so glad you came. I'm so glad you all came. It would have been very lonely if I didn't. The Reverend Archbishop Pope, I can see you standing right there. I feel blessed right there. I love this crew. They're the most friendly people. It's very mutual. It's because you're the boss, so do you want to say something?